Well, just to quickly sort of summarize, I mean, Jorge Martin is looking for a way out of his 2-year Aprilia deal based on a performance clause that was activated around Le Mans. And we've been trying to get some information. We contacted Aprilia for an official reaction, and the words were no comment. How much legitimacy is in this story? I mean, how much can we really believe it? And Dave, after Neil sort of given his opinion, we have to debate whether, this is fair by Aprilia or Jorge Martin, certainly, and, what happens next.
I think it's 100% true. I spoke to someone from Jorge Martin's camp yesterday, and they said on the record they do not deny any of these stories that are coming out. So I think it's 100% an issue between the reigning world champion and Aprilia. And I mean, you have to say it's quite surprising. But yeah, it seems like there's quite a few layers to what was going on.
I don't quite understand what triggered it. First of all, it's completely bog standard for contracts to have clauses in allowing both parties to get out, because there is nothing worse than being forced to do a second year of a contract where neither you nor the team are getting anything out of it. That's completely normal. It's quite often tied to certain performance statistics. What's the twist here is obviously that Jorge Martin, or at least according to the motorsport story, Jorge Martin had a clause saying he had to be amongst the top riders by the sixth race, and of course he isn't, because he's only done sort of a few laps on the thing. The Manuel Pacino in his podcast had some interesting reaction, saying that basically Aprilia wanted to drop the clause completely and just sign Martin to 2 years. Martin said, look, Martin's camp said, can we just reorganize it, change it so that we're measuring over it, have the same performance clause, but over a different period a little bit later in the year. And Aprilia said, no, it's all or nothing. And so, Martin basically said, okay, nothing then. There have been meetings with Honda, so it looks like Honda is going to be a destination or a possibility for Martin at least.
Dave, hang on a sec. But before we get on to what could possibly happen afterwards, am I alone in thinking this is? I mean, I know Aprilia haven't really given any comments yet or any reaction, but is this kind of a little unreasonable by the world champion? Considering two of the crashes were not induced by Aprilia. He's absent from MotoGP by his own reckoning. Yes, he could sort of get on the RSGP and have the brief taste he had of it, mainly at the Qatar GP, think, well, this bike is not going to suit me. Maybe you should have a chat with Enea Bastianini. But, I just find this a little bit, I don't know, unfair perhaps.
I think it's quite normal that, as Dave was saying, it's quite normal to have a clause like this inserted into the contract. I've heard that Jorge's camp was very insistent when they signed with Aprilia last year on that Monday after Mugello, the Italian Grand Prix, that a clause be inserted that would basically give Jorge autonomy after a period of the first season to decide whether he was convinced by Aprilia's commitment, by their competitiveness, and whether they had the chops essentially to provide him with a setup capable for fighting for the World Championship. I also heard from Jorge's camp that, any manager that wouldn't have inserted that clause into a contract for a potential world champion would really not be doing their job properly at all.
Yeah, 100%.
So I don't think that is unreasonable. And then we're sort of veering into territory where, if Aprilia are telling him, like, let's rip up this clause and you sign on for year 2 without really having any experience, I mean, is that completely reasonable? I mean, everyone is obviously looking out for their own interests. Aprilia want to get next year confirmed and be able to work towards
Neil,
that.
because of what Martin's done, Aprilia have to start planning for 2026. They have to start essentially testing mid-season. So I don't think that's very, it's unfair of them to say, can you please commit to the second year of your deal? Because, we want to try and push for Grand Prix wins and the title.
Yeah, absolutely. But by the same token, Jorge Martin is an elite rider in MotoGP. And what he's seeing right now is Aprilia arguably at the back of the constructors' standings in MotoGP, and this other this other interesting option now, this other avenue potentially available, which looks maybe like it has more of a kind of a long-term thing going for it.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, yes, it's not Aprilia's fault that Martin is out. I mean, you can argue about the first one, the crash at Sepang. I would still put that down more on Jorge Martin than on Aprilia. Getting thrown off your super motorbike on cold tires is completely your own fault. So that is completely on Martin, and there's not a lot you can do about the last one, about the one in Qatar. I think. Again, I don't quite understand what triggered the whole thing, because Martin did actually drive up all the way to Le Mans, because he still can't fly because of this collapsed lung. He's still recovering from that. But he did drive up all the way from Andorra to Le Mans to meet with people. So that is in itself a sign that there is very much something going on. It does seem, to me, it seems unreasonable that Aprilia wanted to drop the clause completely. I mean, the just thing to do is to say, look, all right, we've lost this. We're going to take the next X races, or your first 6 races, to make an assessment of where you are. And we'll set these goals. Obviously, he's not going to be in there for in the running for the championship. But yeah, you have to set sort of like realistic goals, and both sides need to give each other a chance to prove it. And to me, the problem is that trust is now broken. Trust is everything in all of these relationships, and this whole situation has just destroyed the trust. And I don't think there's any way back from it.
Yeah, I think the landscape of MotoGP has changed quite drastically from last June, when Jorge did sign his deal with Aprilia. At that point, there was an argument to be made that Aprilia was the second best bike on the grid. We'd seen a super strong start to the year for Maverick winning in Austin and having that great round in Portugal, I think, and Aleix had a couple of really strong appearances in the first third of last year, but then the wheels really fell off the whole ship kind of midway through last year for Aprilia. And okay, Martin obviously hasn't helped the situation with these injuries. They've lost the kind of the figurehead, but I guess you could say this is a factory kind of going through transition. Romano Albesiano left as technical director at the end of last year. Fabiano Sterlachini has come in from his exodus after his KTM stint. They're still trying to find themselves and kind of find where they are. So, and also add into the fact now that this time a year ago, Honda were finishing, in the last 5 or 6 places in every Grand Prix. Suddenly there's this other option which can offer you a ginormous salary, probably a fairly long-term commitment, which looks very appealing for 2027, because we know that Honda has that sort of financial stability and that financial might, and they seem to have got their shit together, so to speak. They have a good bike that is capable of, winning a wet race on Sunday. They have a very good test team. They have a plan, and they also have one of the figureheads at Aprilia that had kind of brought Aprilia to the second spot on the manufacturers' table, for the last couple of years.
I mean, we're kind of feeding on crumbs here at the moment. Both sides, of course, not really commenting because there are legal and contractual mitigations at stake. I mean, it's good that you were able to speak to Jorge Martin's management crew, Neil. But 2 things quickly. One, Martin's philosophy or personal approach to his career might have changed in the wake of the spate of injuries. I mean, particularly the Qatar one. I need something more settled. Like you say, Neil, there's certain appeals to HRC.
He must think that the bike is cursed. Do you know what I mean? Like, he must think the whole deal is cursed. We know that riders are superstitious, and this just reeks of just curse.
We also know that it's not a dog. I mean, Iagura as a rookie is able to sort of put top 10 results. The last 2 GPs have been pretty tricky for him. But the other thing is that we kind of hear rumors and talk that Aprilia behind the scenes, the way they work, can be a little bit inconsistent, for want of a nicer word. This is one reason that Maverick Vinales, who's shown that he's still a very fast MotoGP rider capable of taking trophies, wanted to try something different for 2025. But then the counter to that is that Jorge Martin's best friend is the guy that knows Aprilia better than anybody, advocated both for the factory and for the rider, and essentially was pretty much a matchmaker in putting the deal together. So, if Jorge's getting cold feet about the way that Aprilia work, then you think he would have known about that thanks to Aleix's feedback.
I think Martin also and his management team have been quite wily in the past. I mean, you think back to when he was with KTM in Moto2, obviously the first year of that in 2019 when he stepped up as the reigning Moto3 champion was a disaster, and KTM's package was not competitive up until the final races of that year. Then at the start of 2020, I think there was an option for maybe Jorge to step up to MotoGP with KTM in 2021.
Yep.
But I mean, there was potentially a clause in there in which he could get out if a KTM rider wasn't in the top certain number of positions in the championship, and then he did that, and I think that caused quite a bit of bad feeling with KTM because they felt that
it was by June, and the MotoGP season didn't start until July because of the COVID pandemic, which is a stroke of genius. And then, of course, Brad Binder went and won a couple of races.
Yeah, and also, you know, KTM probably learned from that, and you have to imagine their contract situation with Acosta as a direct consequence.
Yes, it's probably a lot more expensive to break contracts for KTM now.
So
Sorry, Neil,
so from that, I think we can garner that his management team is certainly on the ball and knows the inside of their contracts. So they know their contracts inside out and know any kind of ways and any kind of avenues to potentially negotiate if the rider isn't feeling it, so to speak.
Well, also worth pointing out, it works out really well.